We have Carol Roth joining us now, the author of The War on Small Business, former, as she likes to say, recovering investment banker. And I wanted to get her on today and ask her what this means. This, according to the Wall Street Journal, the real estate giant in China has said China's property market has slid into severe depression. Hi, Carol. That sounds scary.
Hi, Glenn. Happy September. What a great way to kick off the last 4 months of the year with a big depression in China.
Right. What does it mean?
So China is basically a giant mess. Obviously, outside of their demographic issues, outside of the fact that they're not really an emerging market anymore, and that's putting pressure on their manufacturing, they have this sort of confluence of things going on. The COVID disruptions, they have heat and water power issues that are basically rationing energy. They have youth unemployment at 20%. And then they have this property bubble that has bursted. So basically, China did something similar to what we did. It was a communist version of what we did here leading up to the Great Recession financial crisis, where they just plowed a bunch of cheap money into creating lots and lots of real estate.
Not like ghost cities, not lots of real estate, whole cities that had no one in them.
Literally in the middle of nowhere that nobody wanted to live in. And then the prices of everything just started to get out of control. One of the things that is a little bit different about, there are a lot of things that are a little bit different about China, but one of those things is that housing is about 70% of household wealth. People who have money, the middle class, they don't trust the stock market there, which they should not. And over 90% of households in China actually own their residence. So that compares to about 65% in the United States. So a huge amount of the wealth of the middle class is tied up within real estate. And the property has gotten crazy. Like in the major cities, it's about 50 times the average income. In a crazy place like New York, it's about 10 times the average income. So you can see that has really gotten completely out of control. And we all knew that it was unsustainable. It was just sort of a question of when. Chinese policy and then all of these other events kind of came together at the same time. And now, like we suffered through, 20 years ago, they are going to have to endure the same thing. But with a different tenor, because it's a communist country. China owns the bank. They have the whole middle class is sort of involved, and their wealth is tied up in this. So this is a major issue for the Chinese economy.
I will tell you that this should strike everyone as more than a little odd. It's not odd for us to see protests in front of banks.
Yeah.
In China, that is akin to protesting the Communist Party. They've rolled in with tanks and soldiers, and people are still protesting. That shows how unhappy people are with what's going on. Because in China, as I understand it, please correct me if I'm wrong, here we go out and find a house, then we go to a bank. In China, you go to a bank, you get a loan, you start paying on that loan, and then you go to a builder, and it might take 5 years, but you're paying on that. And what's happened is these builders went bankrupt, and all these people have been paying on this loan, and they, lose their money?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually reports of people living in unfinished homes. So as you mentioned, the middle class in China, they've started to band together, and they're basically saying we're not paying our mortgages anymore. And you have to remember that China has implemented their social credit system, and one of the dings for social credit is not paying your debts, which your mortgage would obviously fall into. So the fact that they are willing to stand up against the Communist Party, against this social credit pushback, just goes to show, as you said, just what a complete disaster this is for the Chinese people and the government.
So President Xi, he is elected one more time. I think it's in November, isn't it?
October 16th. Yeah.
So he's running for re-election, and he did change the Constitution that he could be dictator for life, but only after this election. When Pelosi went out the word is from people that I know in China that are high up in the banking world, that do business in banking over there, that they've been watching their press very closely, because there's half of China and the leadership, they don't want Z. And so some of the reports that came out when Pelosi was going over, where they said he's gonna shoot that plane out of the sky. They made all of these, these demands or expectations of Z, knowing he couldn't do it because humiliation is one of the worst things. Weakness is horrible in China. And so they set him up to be weak. How does this play in his election?
Well, we would assume that there would be fair elections. Obviously, that's in question even in the United States. It certainly is not the case in communist China. And so I think that being entrenched in the party, even though there is pushback, I think it would be a giant surprise if he wasn't elected again.
Okay.
And I do think that censorship has played a big issue in this. Part of the reason I've been told that they've had these COVID lockdowns is because they're trying to control information a lot, not let people talk to each other, not let people in the country, to let the real tenor of what's going on out into the broader population. So there are a lot of people in China who, even though they may be upset about this one particular thing, don't really have a scope on the real story, and who knows what they're being told.
That's unbelievable. This story leads me to something here in America. Bank of America has just started a policy that sounds very familiar, except race is involved now. 0 down payment for mortgages for first-time buyers. And I believe this is for minorities, to help minorities, Black and Hispanics, grow ownership of homes. 0 down payment, 0 closing costs. So just come on in. It's like renting a house. Isn't this what caused 2008?
I know that history always repeats itself and human beings have a hard time learning from the past, but really this wasn't that long ago. You would think
Right.
there would be some grace period
Right.
where we go, okay, yeah, this probably isn't a good thing to do. And it's really frustrating because it's one of those things that sounds very nice on the surface. Oh, we're going to help these underserved communities build wealth. That's a good thing. We want everybody in this country to be able to participate in wealth creation opportunities. The last way that you do that is at a point where we're having a top in the housing market. The Fed is raising rates. We're heading into a recession. Prices are going to come down. And then you take somebody who can't afford the down payment and you get them paying on a house that they're not going to be able to afford over the long term. That's basically stealing equity from them in the long term and making them very afraid to continue to do that in the future.
This is what they called predatory lending. And it's being pushed, I'm sure, by the government. It's being pushed by these big banks that are all in collusion with the Great Reset. It is going to impoverish people even more.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to tie this to the ESG, right, this is part of the social initiative. We have to make housing more affordable, but that doesn't do this. I mean, this creates more fees for a bank at a time when they may be losing fees in origination because the Fed is raising interest rates and that's, flowing through the market. It's not like they're creating a fund and saying we're going to buy up properties and we're going to allow you to rent to own. I mean, there are ways that you can do this for underserved communities that I think would be fantastic, but a 0 down mortgage. And by the way, it's not like a veteran 0 down mortgage where there's a strict underwriting process. This is a non-underwritten process. And we know there's a reason why you do underwriting. We've seen how this has gone awry in college lending. Now they're bringing it back to the mortgage industry once again because there wasn't enough damage the first time around.
Or they want to make sure that there is nothing left for people to own.
Or
Yeah.
maybe they want the poor to be able to have this at the expense of the middle class, and they'll just forgive those loans like, they're on the kick of forgiving every other loan.
Unbelievable.
So there's a buffet of possible fantastic
and none of them are good.
Glenn.
None of them are honest. None of them are free market based. None of them are ethical. None of them.
No, it's picking winners and losers. It's letting the government and these big entities play venture capitalists in a way that they shouldn't, and it's not teaching sort of the discipline so that we allow for these broad wealth creation opportunities, which is the future of prosperity. Because we know at the end of the day, big business, big government, big special interest doesn't want that. They want to gut the middle and working class. They want to consolidate power, and so every one of these policies you're seeing ultimately ties back to that in some way.
Energy prices. Goldman Sachs is now saying just the energy prices will push the UK inflation to 22%. That is a near post-war record of 22% inflation. Let me get another story here because I read here, cost of living. Shoppers despair at cost of staple foods soar up to 20% in a year. That's remarkable. I mean, we're all going to see this, and it's a lot of it is coming from this craziness of ESG with the energy.
Absolutely. This is entirely self-inflicted. And that's the most frustrating part of this, is it could have been avoided, but it was deliberate by policy. And who's going to bear the brunt of it? It is the small businesses. It is the middle and working class. It is the poor. It's the people who really can't afford to have this happen. I've seen things all over Twitter and been sharing some of the stories coming out of Europe and the UK. In particular, with small businesses that are getting their energy bills and they're, something like 10,000 euros or, like multiple tens of thousands of euros. And it's just completely non-sustainable. I mean, obviously, nobody's going to be able to operate under those types of conditions. It's going to be a really ugly winter. And as we're talking about not learning lessons, this should be a giant neon sign for us to go, okay, they made a mistake. Let's just own it and reverse course. But they're continuing. They just passed the biggest climate bill and are touting about what a great thing there is, as if there's not more pain and suffering on the other side.
I will tell you, Marx said that for a communist revolution to happen, you needed to have the working class rise up, and then they could close it down. And that if you can't get them naturally, you have to create the conditions for that. And everything, including the IRS, all of these things are designed to bankrupt the middle and lower class, to wipe them out entirely. And when that happens, you will have revolution on the street. It is. Go ahead.
You will own nothing, and you will not be happy, because as we have seen throughout history, those that don't own anything are not the people who are happy.
Yes. Thank you so much, Carol. Appreciate it.
Another uplifting segment.
Yeah. Well, one of these days it'll turn around.
One day we'll have good news.
Yeah.
I promise.
One of these days. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. You bet.